Hi everybody, thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn and I run the services at medcommsnetworking.com. So information resources, information services, activities and so on for people who work in and around the global medcoms community, by which I mean people who work in and around medical education, medical communications, medical publishing, and the associated businesses and so forth. You'll find there's lots going on. You'll find we generate a lot of video content through webinars like this. If you look at NetworkPharma TV, you'll find there's more than 500 videos there now. Also importantly, a shout out to those of you who are interested in joining the business, maybe as a medical writer, account manager or whatever. There's lots of information at firstmedcommsjob.com specifically for you guys to help you understand the business. So these webinars are great, and we're attracting international audiences. We've got a big international audience again today. It's great to have people joining in and talking about topics of interest to any of us working in and around medcoms. And of course, this year AI has become a bit of a hot topic. So we've run a number of webinars about and around AI. And today, I'm absolutely delighted we've got the guys from Camino coming to join us. What I'm hoping we're going to do today is talk very much the sort of practicalities of what we can actually do. I should say, I think it's worth saying, particularly with the AI field, which is moving so fast, that we are talking in May, early May. Maybe we should stress early May 2023. Okay, so what we say today is probably going to be out of date in a week or two or a month's time. But these discussions are really interesting at the moment to see how people are playing with the AI, like Chat GPT, but also the other AI tools. What can we do? And we want to try and keep this as practical as possible. And I'd love the audience to be joining in, please, with any comments or observations. Share your own experiences. We'll weave that into the conversation. So quick presentation and then some Q&A. So James, I'm handing over to you. Take us away.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. My name is James. I am originally a computer scientist and developer, but now work in medcoms, bringing innovation to medcoms. So very interested in Omnichannel and, of course, AI. I'm joined by my colleagues, Jess.
Hello, my name is Jess. I'm a director at Camino Communications. I've been in medcoms. I'm very much that classic person who fell out of university not knowing what they wanted to do, landed in medcoms and never quite got out of it. But my background is across the medcom spectrum, but specialising in medical education and learning and development, and now really focusing on Omnichannel. Natasha?
Hi, I'm Natasha Singh. I'm a scientific director at Camino Communications. I've got over 20 years experience now in medcoms. I went straight in after my PhD, started on the client services side and then moved over to medical writing, where I've been for about 15 years now. I have noticed over the last 15 years, things have really changed as a medical writer. We've got more audiences to write for, more variety of content and formats, and we also have Omnichannel now, which is a fantastic and exciting challenge going forwards for writers. And of course, AI to contend with, which hopefully can provide some useful tools going forwards.
To contend with, yes. Okay, so really quick introduction to what we're talking about today. What do we mean by Chat GPT and all these technologies? So 3 basic layers of AI. We start with AI, artificial intelligence. So that's the broad field of having computers simulate intelligence. Below that, we're talking about large language models. So this is a specific type of AI where we're focusing on language-related tasks, that is, understanding and generating language. And then Chat GPT is an interface to large language models. So OpenAI created GPT 3.5, now GPT 4, and then where this all kind of really kicked off and became exciting, became available and aware in the public sphere was when they created the Chat GPT interface around the GPT large language model. So that's where we're at. It was released the end of last year. GPT was created by scraping billions of pieces of text off the internet and creating that large language model. So it's trained on information, which is slightly out of date, a year or so old, but it's very good at generating and understanding language, as I say, and is applicable to understanding new bits of content. So you can bring it something new and it'll be able to comprehend or to parse that text and generate something new, which is many of the examples we're going to talk about today. So what is GPT good for? I like this analogy that it's a calculator for words. A calculator is great for helping you do maths, but you still need to do the maths. So GPT is like that, but it helps you understanding right words. It's crucially a language model, not a knowledge model. As I said, it was trained on information, but then it's understanding, try not to anthropomorphize GPT, is understanding of knowledge is slightly out of date. It can hallucinate, which is where it says things that aren't true. But really, it's about how do we harness these language powers, this language model to help us in our careers and our day-to-day jobs, rather than using it to really come up with answers. I think Google and Microsoft's use of GPT and similar models for search, for information retrieval, is somewhat of confuses the whole situation. It's best used when we're doing that calculator for words type of approach. So there's actually two ways we can access the model. The first one we mentioned is public interface, is Chat GPT. It's free. You just go to the website, no setup, dead easy to use. Check with your legal team whether you can put information into it. I'm not your lawyer. But generally, you should probably be careful to not paste private data into Chat GPT. By default, it uses that information to retrain the model. It says that in the terms and conditions, but you can now easily opt out of that. An alternative interface is the developer interface. This is where, or the API, this is where you can build other tools on top of those GPT models. You can do things that are more confidential. You can use larger data sets, and you ultimately have more control. It does cost, but it is relatively cheap. And we'll talk you through some of the potential applications that we're playing with using that developer interface as well. But first, Natasha is going to take us through some real-world examples of that public interface day-to-day that you can use now. Natasha.
Thanks, James. Thanks. So let's look at some ways in which we can use ChatGPT now for more general types of medical writing. So firstly, we can use it as a research tool. You can ask for a background or an overview of a particular therapy or key concept which is unfamiliar to you and which you want to know more about. So you've got to make sure that you're as specific as possible with your questions. It's really important. And you really need to think about the exact information you need when writing those prompts. So we've got some examples of cases on the right. At the top, for example, when we're asking for an overview of type 2 diabetes, you can include specific areas such as if you want to know about epidemiology or etiology, and you can help ensure you get the correct level and tone of information by adding an audience, such as for endocrinologists. Some other ideas here, you can ask for an explanation of the complement system and think about how many words you want. So you can do something for fewer than 200 words, for example. And with all of these, we often would like to get a nice set of references. But for this, with ChatGPT, we've got to be careful with those references and check them very carefully and try and be as specific as possible, maybe asking within a particular duration of time. Going on to the next slide. So we can use ChatGPT to help with good old writer's block. It can provide a starting point when we're struggling to know where to begin. So we've got some more examples on the right here. At the top, for example, you could ask for a summary of parts of a publication, such as intros and conclusions, and get those back in bulleted form. Then keep asking questions. So keep thinking up more things which would be interesting to find out, such as side effects. It can also help really well with rephrasing your sentences, helping you be more concise with the way you write. It could give interesting title ideas for meetings or educational programs. But with all of this, it's really important to remember to input just published data. So anything really that's available in the public domain only. And now Jess will look at some more cases.
Yeah, before I talk about this one, I think that's a really good point, actually, that, kind of being really careful what you're putting in, because even if you're opting out of it being used to train the model, you are still sharing private data. So in the same way that you'd be cautious about sharing it with anything else, even if your company says it is okay, your client company may well not have that, and it may be in the MSA. So just be really careful about what you're putting in there. Generally, if anything is, fully in the public domain, already on a website, in an published article, you're fine. But you still need to be really careful about that. But I really liked your point there, Tasha, about kind of coming up with ideas and titles, and we've had to play around with a few, haven't we, of kind of doing that, and certainly that process of brainstorming the title just becomes a lot more fun when you've got a kind of external voice. And I don't think I'm yet to do one where I've taken a suggestion directly from it, but it's definitely helped that thought process and made us look at things differently, which is fun. So our third use case is really thinking about taking content and thinking about how we can repurpose it, which starts to be something that we do more and more in an omnichannel approach. And I'll talk about how that might evolve in a minute, but thinking about moving beyond just writing things in one way that's the kind of pure scientifically correct way, and actually how we can repurpose that content. And I think the one that's generated a lot of attention is around patient lay summaries. I actually don't think that's the best use case, because I think there's some real skill in identifying the right information that a patient requires, not just rewriting content for a patient. But I absolutely think it's a useful tool for making you recognize what content will actually resonate with someone. So things like asking it to rewrite content for a child of 5 to 9 is a really useful case, because I think it just gives you a starting point for, okay, I'm writing at the right level of complexity. It's also great at coming up with analogies. Some of them are terrible, but it makes you think really creatively about how could I explain this in a completely different way. And I know James has been playing around a lot with that with his kids, which is really fun.
I think
but also,
just to add to that, Jess, is you can give it anything as an analogy and it'll try. So, you know, I was playing with COPD yesterday and throwing in like bowling, Jurassic Park, watchmaking, and it will try everything. Some of them make no sense.
Yeah,
but
sometimes you just need to go, that doesn't work. But it's a good prompt, right, to make you think differently. And you might find one that you think, oh my God, yeah, that really does work. So yeah, I think if you've got some existing material that's being developed and then someone says, actually, how do we start repurposing this for a different audience? It's not as simple as whack it into GPT and what you get out is what you can give back to the client or to the audience. But absolutely, I think it's a useful tool to along that process. And I think that, you know, we've said it a few times, it's a tool. It's not fixing things. It's not doing the work for you. But in the same way that spell check is a tool, in the same way that, as James said, as calculator is a tool, you absolutely want to be using it as part of your process. And I think we're all still figuring out exactly where it is in that process, but that's something that will continue to evolve and will be different in different types of projects as well. So yeah, that's kind of all things, 3 examples there of different types of ways that you can use the publicly available version, with that caveat about thinking about what data you're giving it yourself. And also, as Tasha mentioned around the referencing, I think it's really important. It certainly will create fake references. It will give you references that really aren't credible. So I would use it more as an initial summary of information rather than as an actual research tool, but it's definitely one of the tools in your kit. So then let's think about the developer interface. So as James outlined, it's completely separate and it allows you to do different things. You can have a lot more control of which information it's using to summarize, and that allows you to train it in different ways. So our first one is around insights reports. So in the MedCom space, this is something that's always been needed, but it's certainly become really, really important in the last few years, particularly when you're working with medical affairs teams. So they're saying, you know, we've got loads of people in the field, they're telling us stuff, but we're getting so much data back. We're struggling to identify the trends. We're struggling to process its information. We also have things like advisory boards, market research, loads of places we could get insight, but a lot of it's staying on the shelf. So one of the things that you could do with Chat GPT, or rather the API version, is combine all those data sources and ask it to summarize and find you trends within it. And that allows you to do more interesting things as well. So plot that against our strategy, ask it a question related to your strategy and see what relevant insights you've got. But also look for trends over time. Humans are notoriously bad at spotting trends and tracking them over time, and also at finding outliers. So use it to compensate for the things that humans are really bad at when looking at large data sets, rather than expecting it to do the whole job for you and think strategically. Use it as that kind of tool there. But I think there's a real option to, you know, kind of apply it in this way, generate a nice dashboard, a nice summary of the data that you're getting, that definitely advances our ability to do that. And crucially, point 3 there, respond quickly. I think if this speeds up the time it takes to process those insights, that could be really powerful. Option 2, a MedInfo chatbot. So I am not suggesting that we build a chatbot that we release to the public and they can get all their MedInfo through it, whether that be HCPs or the public. I don't think we're there yet. It's definitely not credible enough someone's going to hack it and it's going to say something terrible. And as we've talked about before, it can already hallucinate. So we definitely are not suggesting that. However, imagine a scenario in which you give that to an internal MedInfo team and allow them to have a predefined load of source material that it uses to generate content. So that would be things like the SPC, the published papers from the clinical trials, potentially also the clinical study reports. And it's using just that material to generate answers about your product. That feels significantly safer, right? So it could be drafting replies for you. It could also be tailoring or rewriting existing content, particularly if you've got a standard response, but the question that you've received is slightly different. That would be a really good use case of saying, actually, can you rewrite this to answer this specific question? Or rather than this coming from a doctor, it's coming from a pharmacist. They're likely to want slightly different responses back. The other thing that I really love about it in this instance is medical information responses tend to be really, really long. And what you want is an exec summary. And once you've got one that you're happy with, ask it to write an exec summary of it. It'll do a really good job of things like that. So I think that might be a nice use case there. And then option 3 is really where it gets exciting for me, our ability to elevate our omnichannel approach. And we always talk about omnichannel as being right content, right format, right time for the audience. But we also think about it, everything that we do needs to be relevant to the audience and to the content that you're trying to communicate from the company. It needs to be connected so that each individual interaction goes on a journey, and it needs to be measurable. And interestingly, I think Chat GPT, large language models, but more broadly, AI can actually help us with all 3 of these cases. And I think there's a couple of things in there. It can help you tailor content to different audiences, as we talked about. It can also extend your content into new formats, allowing you to, repurpose something that's been written as a video, all of those kind of things. Again, bite-sized summaries is really important. So that can help us with relevance. The connected piece, there's some options to think about using it, again, a bit like a chatbot, and testing your narratives to work out how to tell a great story with your data. Using it as a chatbot to refine a message story is a really interesting option. It could also be used to suggest next best action. So a doctor has asked me questions around this. They've looked at this content on our website. What should I go back with as the next stage on that journey? And finally, that piece around measurable. So absolutely similar to what we talked about at the Insights report. If you're generating a load of data as part of an omnichannel campaign, you need to analyze it. You need to spot those trends. And doing something like that, and then creating a metrics dashboard that can plot those key trends and spot change over time, could be really powerful. So hopefully that's useful as 3 kind of broad areas that we're looking at, playing with, starting to implement for our clients already. As I said, all of these require that kind of API developer access. So there is a bit more technical setup involved, but it is actually quite achievable, and something that I think we definitely want to drive as innovation for our clients and to stay relevant in this space. So we're going to shut up now and let you send us some questions. I can see there's already a few in the chat, but Peter, if you want to kick us off.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. So we can go in a whole bunch of different directions here. We probably will end up doing so and falling over ourselves and so on. But I just think there is loads of possibilities out there. We have had a comment that we need to slow down when we're talking. I think maybe we're just a bit excitable. So if panelists, we can all slow down a little bit, I think that would help some of the international audience. But I wanted to start, and I think Jess, you were sort of ending up in talking about using it within the companies. Sorry, my question is, I get frustrated by people who haven't played with Chat GPT. As the public interface. In MedComms, why wouldn't you have a play? I'm understanding that some companies are going, you shall not play, you must not play. There are other companies that are issuing now policies to encourage people to play, but following certain sort of guidelines and so on, and indeed measuring, tracking, auditing, and so on, what they're doing. I think this is very much a work in progress. So I just wondered what your experience was with companies, maybe how organized you are internally at the moment, but with other companies, what are you picking up? Maybe with pharma companies or agencies, are people, what's your experience? I think I've covered all the angles there, but what was your experience of what people are doing?
Yeah, everyone's responding in different ways, and I think that's in itself interesting. Even if your company has said don't use it, I would say use it in your personal time on a personal device for non-work related things. Build your own skill set in this area. And I know you're doing a session next week on prompt engineering, which I'm sure is going to be fascinating, but I also think there's some virtue in just keep trying, keep doing things with it, and you'll learn so much just by trial and error. I think in terms of talking to our clients, once you demystify and have that clarity of the two different types, that using the API developer version is not the same as using Chat GPT in the public, you can start having a more sensible conversation about where it can be applied. And clearly there are some things that are just too high risk around patient safety, compliance, etc., that we wouldn't recommend touching. But actually, if you put some guardrails in place and have an open and honest conversation about it, and also think about things as a pilot rather than as things you're going to roll out en masse straight away, I think we should be embracing those opportunities. And certainly we have got some clients who we've been very pleasantly surprised by how open they are to that.
Right. Okay. Anyone else got a comment on that side? I think it's interesting, the variety, but it's interesting when someone like in a farm company is very open to playing with this stuff. Anybody got, no? Okay. All right. Let's move on from that. Okay. Let's just completely agree.
We do your CV. You know, like there's so much you could use it for without, you know, as Jess says, in your personal time.
Okay, look, one of the things I think we've, and maybe I get a bit sort of confused about this myself, but we're talking about Chat GPT. Everyone talks about Chat GPT like it's a thing. It's a thing, and it's very easy to find problems with Chat GPT. But actually, Chat GPT is a work in progress, and a lot of what I think you've been talking about is using public Chat GPT, which is 3.5, for instance, and it's already version 4 if you can get access to it. I think I'm supposed to be on a wait list, but I haven't been able to get access to it. And what I'm hearing from people who have got access to it is it's a whole different level of accuracy and all sorts of things. Yeah. So again, maybe can you talk a little bit around that, because I think this is really important. And seeing some of the comments coming in, you know, Chat GPT does this, or Chat GPT fails because of that. Yeah. I think we have to be very careful with that language, because we're probably talking about 3.5, not 4, and the difference is huge, for instance, in terms of referencing and so on. And it is just still a work in progress. And we don't want to dismiss AI and Chat GPT and everything that comes with it because we know that it can make up references. That's missing the point completely, isn't it? Yeah,
absolutely. And there's lots of advances, not just in terms of what OpenAI are doing with their GPT models, but Facebook have released a model called Llama, which is much smaller, but you can be more specific with. I was reading about another model called Dolly, which is the first fully open source language model. So you can get all the source training data as well. You can retrain that model yourself. So there's loads of different people doing different things in the space. I completely agree that there's no point in dismissing it because of the issues with, you know, Chat GPT is the one that has broken through. It's like the Napster of digital music, but eventually Spotify and Apple Music and Tidal will all come along further down the road.
Can I pin you down? Are you guys using Chat GPT-4?
Yeah, with the developer access.
With the developer access, right? Okay. So, because I mean, as I say, I think I'm on a wait list, but in terms of the public interface, I don't know how you get access. I mean, you're supposed to be able to pay for it, but I don't know anyone that can pay at the moment. You just have to wait until you're told you're able to.
Or if you pay for the pro version, some people get access to GPT-4 as well. Yeah.
Okay, but even that isn't a given, is it? Because I've tried. Unless I've missed the point or something.
They're just expanding it out slowly, presumably due to capacity issues.
Capacity, exactly. So my only point is Chat GPT isn't one thing. There's a spectrum of activity out there, and people need to sort of think about that and understand that. What's coming in? We've got some. There's quite a few questions coming. Sorry, and I probably lost track of it already. Let's pick out a couple of straightforward questions, and maybe from a writing point of view, Tasha, talk a little bit about it. I mean, the obvious question is: Are you under any threat? Are you worried about it? I mean, we've had a lot of talk here about how you're using it as a tool and so on, but you as the writer, go on, give us your answer to that.
I think it's good to have it. I don't see it as a threat. how I use it is I have it open just at the side. If I have a question, I might just ask it and then see what it brings up, and you critically review it yourself. You analyze it and you see, is it helpful? Is it not? Has it sparked another ideas? So it's good to use for sparks, I think. And it can be fun as well. I mean, I just think it might give you another idea or might bring something else up. Then of course you've got to check if that's true or a hallucination, but at least you know, it's just good to have alongside you. And especially I think many of us work remotely a lot of the time that it's almost like someone else, you're just asking something and see what comes up.
I mean,
yeah,
it does make me laugh because you can get into a conversation, can't you, with it, and sort of start to sort of think, hang on a second, this is a bit surreal because that's not real. That's not a person I'm talking to, which I just think is interesting. What about other sorts of tools? I think, James, you started to touch on it, but talk a little bit more widely, because again, something I'm quite keen that people sort of get, if they don't get it, is that Chat GPT or GPT is just one, and there's now a gazillion tools out there. Have you got any insights, you know, and can you share a few ideas for people to go and have a look at?
Yeah, there's a lot of them, and there's a few that have been mentioned in the chat, such as Forefront AI. These are all built using the developer access on top of the GPT models. So you're essentially using GPT and it's being tailored in some way, such as they're trying to focus the model into summarizing a PDF document or helping you write a sci-fi novel. But the underlying thing is still GPT, which anyone with the developer access can use. And as I say, there are other models out there that are being developed, but estimates are that GPT costs something like $5 billion to generate. So the other ones that are much smaller are obviously not so expensive, but there is a kind of barrier to entry in this space due to the fact that getting a large amount of data and doing the model generation is a computationally expensive thing to do. And therefore financially.
Exactly, but the Googles this world and whatever, they are coming in. They've got Facebook, their own sort of tools and so on. So again, it's really important people do have a look around at these different tools. Jasper gets, I mean, I've no experience with Jasper, but it gets mentioned a lot, for instance. And there are different options out there, and that's just with the language type versions. And then obviously you've got all the other versions that are talking about other sorts of activities. What I was going to ask a question there, and it's gone straight out of my head, which is a bit annoying. Just trying to pick off a couple of very specific questions here, but so this is gonna be a bit random, okay? Someone early on was asking about journals, saying that ChatGPT cannot be a named author, but if used to create a journal article must be noted. What journals might have these guidelines? Well, I know the Springer journals have built it all into their guidelines now,
Yeah. I mean,
that's become quite the norm, hasn't it?
Nonsense. Citing the acknowledgements makes sense.
Yeah, it was quite fun in January when some papers came out quite quickly where it was an author, but as you say, it's about transparency, isn't it? Although at what point do you start going, well, this is just a tool. I don't sit there and say I use spell check and Word and so on. I mean, there is a bit of a discussion in there sort of thing, or a question mark, isn't there? Again, Tasha, have you got a view on that?
I think the trouble is everyone's so individual as well. When is there that crossover from more than a tool? And I think it's really hard to say when that happens, because is the thought coming from your head, or have you seen something new suggested through that tool? But doesn't autocorrect do that for us as well? So I think it's really hard to say where that point is, and I think that's where a lot of confusion and complications come with this, because everyone asks questions differently and responses are coming in differently from Chat GPT, depending, you know, one user might ask the same thing and get a different result. So it's quite hard to say at the moment.
I mean, again, you know, one can't help but think, you know, when Google first came out and we all started using Google to sort of research a topic, and, you know, our ideas were being sparked by what we were finding in Google and so on. We didn't all start saying, well, we've used these search engines in this way at that time to produce this, which has sparked the creative process. I mean, I personally think you should be very transparent about when you're using GPT and so on. But I do think there is a question in terms of where along that spectrum, you know, you do or don't say something. You know, if your ideation, I mean, a lot of people talking now, and I think this is one of the things, again, when I'm talking to people, it's like, if they haven't tried it, they don't get it. But, you know, if you sit there and try just with Chat GPT, you know, make up some names, I think Jess was talking about it or something, it is remarkably good. And I think Jess said she's never used an idea. Okay, I'll believe you, Jess, but, you know, it's remarkably good, at least at getting the creative juices going, you know, and I've talked to people who said, look, we've saved hours just by going, you know, there's a room full of people here and someone's just turned to a computer and gone, oh, let's try it. And they've suddenly gone, wow, actually, there's stuff to talk about here. We've saved hours over that sort of thing.
For sure. And I think like one of my favorite use cases was I was doing a piece and I was recapping some stuff that I did ages ago, not scientific content, adult learning theory content. And I was like, I just need a recap on that bit of theory. And it's stuff I already knew, but I just wanted to refresh my memory. And instead of going back and finding the references and reading through 5 websites, and that probably would have taken me 3 hours, I was done in 10 minutes by asking one question and a couple of follow-up questions. And that's a really, really good use case of just making me more efficient. And it didn't change how long I spent on the project, but it meant instead of spending time on the kind of grunt work aspect of the project, I was more creative. I had more time for strategic thought. It unlocked that bit of my brain because the low level admin piece was being done for me. So that's when I think it's really important. I think that also just prompted another thought that we haven't really talked about quite so much is the benefit of a follow-up question. I can't think of a single time where I've got exactly what I wanted from the first question that I ask. It's the probing other questions of providing more context to my question. So maybe this is why I need prompt engineering. I could do it in one question, but also just saying, you do need to remember that your first question will inform all the subsequent answers and every question will inform it. So if you want to go off in a completely different direction, start a new thread rather than carrying on, but keep asking questions in the same thread is really powerful to kind of refine the response that you're getting. I was also just going to pick up one specific question, which I really liked in the chat. Could I use it to do my writing test for an interview? My answer would be, don't use it to do it for you, but if you're not using it to help you, you are missing a trick. And again, I would be honest about it and say, I used Chat GPT to help me create this. It did not write my final submission, but it helped me. And I'm going to say provocatively, if the company doesn't like that, do you want to work for that kind of company?
Right. Okay. That's an interestingly provocative point, which some of the audience might like to pick up on. But it does, it just opens up an interesting area of discussion. One thing you said in there about the prompting, I mean, my understanding is that if you talk to someone who talks about prompt engineering, the whole point is that you don't ask one question. The whole point is you are iterating, reiterating, and so on. And that's the skill which some people are developing very quickly to ask those questions. But it's not just I can come up with a clever question because I'm a prompt engineer. It's I understand the process of going through a series of questions to get what I want. What else is in there? We've got a doctor, I guess a doctor online who said, as a medical practitioner, he says that patients are using it. Again, it's interesting because I was around in the good old days when doctors were horrified that patients were turning up with a pile of information that they'd come, taken off Google, and there was a huge amount of resistance to it, and a huge amount of concern. Now we're using Chat GPT, other AI tools potentially. The interesting difference is you don't turn up with a whole load of papers. You don't have a whole load of research to do. You actually just come back with a 500-word summary, which sounds very confident. That is, I mean, I know it's sort of similar in terms of step change, but also very different, isn't it? Do you have any sort of insights into patients using it in that way? Anybody? James? Jess? No?
I heard about a medic in a pharma company using it.
Right.
To check if 2 drugs were compatible, and it was actually the marketeer I was speaking to who then said, medic, you can't do that, don't trust it, that's not right. But I think that comes back to I suppose a misunderstanding of what GPT is really good for. As I've said, it's not about that finding knowledge, and people will come to learn that asking ChatGPT your medical conditions and then you take it to your GP and the GP goes, that's utter rubbish. I think you'll come to learn not to trust it for those things and to use it more as that calculator for words.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
However, However, sorry, let's pursue this one a little bit, because this is the easy, and a lot of the comments coming in here. You know, it's hallucinating, it's wrong, it's whatever. Okay, you can't trust it. Okay, I push back against that still and say it's a work in progress. So think about what it can do, but also specifically, let's talk. You touched on it, I think, but let's talk a bit more about it. If you're talking about single domain type data, you know, stuff, you know, or let's put a database together of all the SPC information, and that's happening. Pharma GPT is out there, Bio GPT is out there. You know, everyone's got a GPT for their own area. If you take a lot of information, a serious amount of information that's all valid and verified and robust and all the rest of it, and stick in a box and stick the AI type chatbots on the front of it, how can it possibly get it wrong? Or at least it must be very accurate. And is that not incredibly useful? So is the answer not, or is part of the answer just going to be these big single domain type databases? You know, when I worked in a pharma company and we had a new drug coming out, the medical information department was just swamped with papers and references and stuff. And that's a long time ago. So these days it must be 10 times bigger. You know, nobody can handle it. You touched on your medic, I think, talking about checking. I mean, forget Chat GPT for a minute and just go use the functionality on big databases. And how amazingly useful is that going to be for all sorts of people? And why shouldn't a patient, I think you said something, Jess, early on about accessing patients' access. Why shouldn't a drug company go, look, here's my GPT chatbot, as it were, ask your question in any way that you want to, in any language, in whatever, and it will give you an answer very. And I don't know whether we're that far away from that. People don't seem to want to talk about that, but we're not very far away from that, are we?
We're not far away from it being technically possible, and whichever company is brave enough to try it first will get stung, but they will also lead the pack. And there's going to, you know, whoever's second or third or fourth will be doing it really, really well. So I think definitely it is going to evolve in that direction. But at the same time, we are talking about patient safety. We're talking about a very highly regulated industry. So pharma, as with everything else, is not going to move as fast as other areas, but absolutely, like, it's going in that direction, and that's why we want to be part of it.
So but if I'm going to stick with this slightly, because if you take the SPCs, just take that database of all the SPCs, and you know, which is extremely verifiable, regulated, robust information, but one person can't know everything that's in there and can't go through and track trends and can't. This makes that possible. And the comment that's coming in here, so people keep saying it's only trustworthy up till September 2021 or something.
Yeah,
I know, but that's Chat GPT, GPT-3, it was trained up to, but that's not the point. And we're already beyond that stage. And I think people have to get beyond that. I cut across you, James, sorry.
So Morgan Stanley have worked with OpenAI to take a bunch of their internal data and retrain the model on that specifically, and then have their analysts be able to ask questions of it. So they've created their own private little internal chatbot on their very structured formulaic data. That's the sort of thing that's going to be happening short term. Pharma companies will go, right, well, we've got all this stuff about our products, let's give it to our teams, rather than give it to the general public. I do think that I agree with you. There will be, someone will take all of SciMed or, you know, every published paper and stick it into a massive chatbot, but then there'll be contradictions in there, and you know, you'll have to wait which bit of information is right, and by the nature of the language model, the underlying language model, to be able to talk needs to have a bunch of source information, right, which is conversational. So to then be able to lock that down so that it only gives you scientific information is very hard to do. So all of that is possible, but I think that's further out, that public interface. It's going to be much more internal. How do we create something that is easily accessible on our own data?
Let's go back to your specialty. Is that the right way of putting it? You can correct me if I'm using the wrong words for you. But you know, you're putting yourself forward to new agency and omnichannel. You're embracing omnichannel. And Jess, you were talking about AI in terms of repurposing information for different audiences, for instance. But one specific point, which I don't think you talked about, which I thought was maybe worth asking you about, was part of omnichannel isn't about taking some information for different audiences. It's about presenting the same information for the same audience in different ways. Is that a fair point? So you can use AI now to take some information and go, there's a paper. Let's, please, we need to turn this into a little PowerPoint presentation or a little website or a little this or a little that, or take the key messages or do this. And that is very, very possible with AI just now, isn't it? Repurposing. And you didn't mention that before, so I just thought I'd try and prompt a reaction from you on that front and see what you think about that, or am I missing the point?
You're not missing the point at all. Yes, we absolutely would and do use it in that way. But again, I'm going to come back to what we've said throughout, as a tool, as part of the process, not to do it for us.
Okay, yeah.
So,
but again, I know I'm pushing this, but again, if you take a bunch of content and you say to a bunch of people, right, or somebody, a writer, whatever, turn this into that. 6 months ago, they'd have sat down, rolled their sleeves up and said, right, for next week, I'm going to do this, right? You can, using these tools, speed that process up significantly.
Yes.
Is that a fair comment? Yeah. Okay.
Because you can say,
okay,
I want to take this and make it, I'm going to use this content for an infographic for patients aged 5 to 9, or for specialist oncologists, and then you get that first draft because you're giving it who the audience is, you're giving it the format, and it's creating you that rough first draft that you can then, as you say, save time.
And I heard what you said, Jess, and I'm sure you said it very consciously. You can save an enormous amount of time on the grunt work, as it were, and free up the time to do the interesting stuff. Again, I hear a lot of people talking about AI in all sorts of fields where it's not about taking people's jobs, it's about making your job easier, taking the grunt away, which I accept. But can we be honest about it? There's a spectrum of medical writers out there doing a spectrum of activity, some of which is just grunt work. Why shouldn't we just take that out of the equation? Not everybody's doing the clever stuff. Is it a fair point to say, the good writers doing the clever stuff are probably fine, they'll use this as a tool? Is it unreasonable to say that there's a lot of medical writing out there that isn't in that camp, where actually AI could have a severe effect and impact? Or am I getting into the dangerous territory there?
So my answer to that is yes, but it won't be Chat GPT.
Understood. So I'm still trying to keep this. I'm trying to make that point. AI
will at some point remove the need to do data checks the way that we do data checks now. It will remove the need to do Viva referencing the way that we do Viva referencing now. Those are the things that will be the most exciting in some ways, right? That we won't have to do that stuff anymore, that all of that part will be sped up. So absolutely, that will be a change. But I think in our industry, I think it's going to be a redistribution of work rather than a change of number of people employed.
Yeah. But we're in a business where we are desperate for more writers. So, there's an argument to say it's just really good. Because,
it's just going to do the things we can't do. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. Look, the questions are coming in, that the people are talking in the chat rooms to each other and probably shouting at me along the way and all the rest of it. I get all that. But I think probably we've covered some quite interesting ground there and put some nice ideas out there. So I'm going to draw a line to the recorded part of this session, if that's okay, guys. Okay. I'm going to say a huge thank you to you. I encourage the audience here today, but also watching the video later, to make contact with you. I know you're all very happy to hear LinkedIn is the easy way of doing it. So please do, people, make connections. Please keep the conversations going. I think we're a long way from understanding how this is all going to really work in and around MedComms, let alone anywhere else. But it certainly adds some, some fun into the into our work at the moment. So thank you very much. If anyone's interested in what I'm doing, obviously medcommsnetworking.com or reach out to me. But for today and for now, I'm just going to ask everyone to give us a little wave and say goodbye, and then we'll just have a few minutes talking to the audience unrecorded. So bye-bye.